The winter broke late that year, brittle and cold-boned, laying its weight like a curse over the high country. Snow still clung to the north-facing slopes, and the cattlemen cursed the sky, muttering about weak calves and wolves moving down early. Up in the rimlands, where pines shadowed the creeks and the wind felt older than words, a widower named Elias Drum rode with a rifle strapped across his back and murder inside him. He hadn't spoken a full sentence in 3 days. His horse, a black gelding with a scar under one eye, made no sound either. They both understood the task. There was a woman north of Sundown Ridge who'd made herself hard to find, and she had a boy with her. Elias meant to kill them both. He told himself it wasn't anger driving him, but order. It wasn't about grief or madness or anything so soft. It was arithmetic. Years ago, the woman, her name was Vera Lark, though it tasted wrong in his mouth, had testified in a hanging trial. Not just spoken, but stared Elias' brother straight through when she named him one of the three who'd burned that Ute farm outside San Silo. Her words swung that rope. And now Ben Drum was buried near a creek with no stone, just a stump where folks spit tobacco. Elias believed in righting things. He believed in the slow economy of justice. And when he found Vera, when he saw the boy she'd birthed after that trial, he'd take from her what she'd taken from him. Not fast, not clean, just true. The trail forked past old mining ruins, collapsed cabins, half a smokestack, wagon iron rusted into the brush. He passed through the place like a ghost might, neither touching nor speaking, and camped that night beneath a bluff that faced the moon. He drank nothing, smoked nothing, just sat and sharpened the same blade over and over until his thumb bore a red ribbon. In the morning he spotted signs, boot tracks, 2 sizes fresh. A scrap of sacking cloth snagged on bramble. He dismounted to study them, pressing his hand to the indentations in the mud. The woman was light-footed, but the boy was dragging his right boot like it hurt him to lift it. That gave Elias a picture, small, limping, dependent, easier. They were heading deeper into the timberline, toward a known hunting trail long abandoned. Smart of her. No ranchers rode this way anymore. He followed. Days passed with cold meals and colder firelight. On the fourth, he heard the whimper of a boy just ahead of dusk. It was faint, but Elias had been a bounty tracker in his youth, and he knew the sounds people made when they thought they were alone. He climbed a ridge on foot, rifle in hand, and looked down into a shallow draw. There she was. Vera Lark sat beside a smoldering fire, trying to warm a pot. Her hair was shorter than he remembered, streaked with iron gray. She wore a coat far too big for her, likely stolen, and the boy lay bundled at her side in a bed of pine needles and tarp. He was maybe 9, maybe younger, pale and thin, the way sick boys get in the mountains. Elias sighted them down his rifle and watched for a long while. They looked nothing like vengeance, but he was used to the trick of appearances. He waited till dark to move, took his steps slow, boots wrapped in burlap, his breath timed with the wind. He was just 2 lengths from them, raising the barrel when the boy stirred and looked at him. There was no scream, no panic, just a small voice, thin as wind through aspens. "You came back." Elias froze. He had not prepared for words like that. The boy didn't reach for his mother, didn't cower or call out. He just stared at him, wide-eyed and still. "You came back," the boy said again, and smiled. It wasn't the smile of fear. It was the kind given to a returned father. The rifle trembled in Elias' hands. Vera woke then, startled, reaching instinctively for the boy. And she looked right at Elias' drum. Her mouth opened. No sound came, just the hush of recognition. She did not plead, she did not rise. She just whispered, "God help you," and folded her arms around her son. Elias turned and vanished back into the dark. The next morning he woke shivering beneath a logjam of snow-dusted branches. His horse had pulled free of its tie, grazing down by the river. He didn't call it. He didn't move. He lay there thinking of the boy's voice, that stunned, trusting smile. And he remembered something he'd never meant to remember, his wife, Myra, sitting in a willow chair years ago, the firelight catching the gold in her hair as she whispered stories to a child that had died in her belly before it ever took a breath. He hadn't thought of that night in 5 winters. He buried it again, but part of him stayed buried with it. By the next sundown, Elias rode east instead of north. He told himself it was a ruse, a circling maneuver, but it wasn't. He was riding away, not back to town, not toward forgiveness, just away. Yet by the third day, he'd turned around. He didn't know why. His logic betrayed him. He fed on old trail biscuits and creek water, telling himself it was unfinished business. But in the corners of his mind, something had fractured. He needed to see the boy again. Not to kill, not yet, just to know. He rode with urgency now, backtracking his own sign like a dog confused by its scent. When he reached the draw again, the camp was gone. Ashes cold, tracks already washed half away. But something had been left behind, on purpose or mistake, he couldn't say. A carving in the bark of a fir tree, crude and shallow. "I see you, too." Beneath it, the shape of a bird, wings crooked, as if in mid-flight, or falling. Elias stared at it long after the wind rose. He took out his knife and touched the edge to the bark, then stopped. He sheathed it. And rode west, slow now, almost uncertain, the hunter becoming a man who didn't know his own name. But the road behind had grown teeth. And the world ahead held more than one kind of reckoning. Vera moved like a woman who had learned not to make sound, not even with her breathing. She wrapped the boy's foot again, tighter this time, knowing the bandage would only slow the rot, not stop it. He didn't complain. He never did, not when the fever first took him, and not now, even as his toes turned the color of river stones. The mountains had changed them both. In the first months, she'd still cursed aloud, still cried when she thought no one could hear. But after the snows came hard and early, after the boy coughed blood into the crook of her shirt one night, the woman she had been died quietly under the pine needles, and something else climbed into her skin. She taught him to move only at dusk and dawn, to eat quietly, to say nothing unless spoken to, and even then to measure every word. They were not hiding from wolves. Wolves were honest. They were hiding from men. For a time, Vera believed it had worked. She believed they had vanished into the folds of the rimlands like a stain into snow. Then she saw the man by the fire, his face shadowed by the rifle's edge. She knew him. He hadn't aged right. He looked carved, not grown. The years had chiseled into him, not added to him, and the hatred on his face was not sudden. It had lived there a long time. But he hadn't fired. He'd vanished like smoke. That meant something worse. She did not sleep after that night. She listened, to the wind, to her son's breathing, to silence thick as pine pitch. And when the boy whispered, "He looked like someone I used to dream," she nearly screamed. She knew what men like Elias Drum did with their anger. They didn't let it go. They starved it until it learned to feed on smaller things, flesh, breath, names. They moved again, east this time, through a narrow pass that deer avoided and snow drifted over faster than boots could mark. The boy was weakening. Vera carried him in the mornings. At night, she wrapped their bodies together beneath the tarp, trying to bleed her warmth into him. But the mountains weren't just cruel. They were old, old enough to remember blood, and there were others in them. 3 nights past the pass, they came across a camp, not made for fire but for watching. She found the post first, fresh wood jammed into frost, with a trap strung low across the trail. Crude but smart, it was not meant for animals. The boy saw the rest. Alinta half hidden beneath brush, tracks scattered in a deliberate circle, meant to confuse. "Someone lives here," he said, voice brittle from the cold. Vera crouched low, peering into the shape of the land. Her instincts told her it wasn't settlers or hunters. The camp was too quiet, too prepared. Then she found the mark, a strip of blue cloth tied around a dead limb. That color didn't belong to any ranch or wagon train, but she'd seen it before. During the war, the regulators in New Mexico used blue to signal. They hunted deserters, stragglers, women accused of sheltering them. Vera had known one, had spat in his face before fleeing a church in flames. Now the blue ribbon meant someone else was watching the passes. They moved again, not fast, not straight. Behind them in the thin snow crust, new prints began to appear, larger than Elia's drum, lighter too, barely visible but real. 3 sets, one always behind the others. Vera counted steps, checked distance. Whoever they were circling. On the 5th night, she lit a fire. Not for warmth, not for food. For warning. She let it burn high into the dark and scattered pine resin into the flame. The smoke turned black, a message. She didn't know who would see it, or what it would bring. That same night, Elias crossed paths with something strange. He'd been riding along an old elk trail, following his own guilt like it owed him something. He didn't believe in signs, but when he saw the smoke curling above the black ridge, a thick, tar-colored plume, his stomach tightened. He reached the edge of the valley by dusk. The fire had already died, but its scent lingered, resin and warning. And there in the cold ash, a single boot print, small, dragging. The boy. He wasn't sure why it gutted him. He moved fast now, not to kill. He couldn't name what drove him. It wasn't rage, wasn't even duty. He thought of the boy's voice again. The way he'd said, "You came back," like it meant salvation. Elias had never been anyone's salvation. He'd been a hammer, a drunk, a shadow behind his brother, but something in that voice had slipped past his armor. He pressed deeper into the forest. Then came the tracks, not Vera's, not the boys', others. Barely more than whispers in the snow, but he counted them, 3, tight spacing, disciplined. Whoever they were hunting like him. He slowed, slid from the saddle, studied the prints. Military. Or trained like it. Then he saw the mark, half covered in snow, but unmistakable. Blue cloth. Elias stiffened. He'd seen that blue once in Kansas, when 3 men strung a 15-year-old half-Mexican boy to a sycamore for stealing a mule. That was how the regulators marked their passage. It no longer mattered why he'd come. He was no longer the only hunter. That night, he watched the shadows longer than he watched the stars. And come morning, he wasn't sure if he was tracking the woman or protecting her. The distinction, he knew, would not matter in the end. They made it to the old smelter ruins just before dusk, Vera half carrying the boy as the wind pulled hard through the burned-out rafters. The place had long since gone to ash and rust. Only the stone foundations stood, blackened and split like broken teeth. Vera remembered this place. She'd passed through once as a girl, tied to a mule cart behind her uncle's wagon, before he'd sold the last of their corn liquor and vanished into the silver camps. Back then, the smelter had roared day and night, smoke curling up through the gorge like judgment. Now it was hollow, dead, forgotten by every map but hers. That was why she brought the boy here. He was near past waking. The cold had taken his color, his words. She laid him beside an old crucible pit lined with soot, wrapped him in every layer they had left, and placed his bare feet in her lap. She breathed on them, rubbed them, cursed herself for not being enough to stop what was coming. The boy stirred once, barely. "Mama." She wiped the frost from his mouth. "Rest, just rest now." She didn't cry. That part of her had hardened, calcified into something sharp. When the dark came down, she started to build the decoy, quick and crude, with brush and old oilcloth shaped like a resting body. She left a trail of scuff marks leading into it, a false shelter, a false sleep. Then she took the boy and went deeper into the sub-level pit where slag used to be poured. The cold bit harder there, but the stone would hide them, maybe long enough. That same night, Elias passed under the black pines and spotted the ruins from the ridge. He'd seen their smoke trail hours before and picked up her broken trail again, blood, likely from the boy, smeared on a flat stone. She wasn't hiding now. She was surviving. He saw the decoy, but only because he'd once made one like it himself to fool Union scouts near Sand Creek. It was a trap, but not meant for him. That was what made him pause. He scanned the hills, saw the second trail, barely there. She was running from someone else. He felt it then in his bones, an edge of time sharpening, the kind of moment that slices through a man and leaves only what matters. Behind him the wind shifted. He turned, saw nothing, but he knew they were out there, the blue-ribbon men, regulators, killers. They wouldn't care about the boy, wouldn't even see him. They hunted people who remembered things wrong, people who testified. Elias slid the rifle from his back and checked the load. 5 rounds left. Enough, maybe. He didn't believe in redemption, but sometimes a man could still choose the shape of his final hour. He circled low through the brush, keeping the smelter ruins between him and the ridge. The snow had begun to fall again, quiet as ash. His boots made no sound. In the pit, Vera didn't sleep. Her breath steamed against the stone. She'd taken a chunk of metal slag and sharpened it with the same motion she once used to gut fish back when she lived near water. Her hands ached, but she gripped the shard tight. The boy was colder now, not shivering, that was worse. She leaned close and said something she hadn't said in years. "His name was Elias," she whispered. "The man your uncle feared. He wore quiet like a coat, but once he spared me." She hadn't meant to say it aloud, but the dark was deep now, and the mountain felt like it wanted witness. "I thought he'd kill me back then, thought that was the shape of his justice, but he didn't, and now I don't know what he is." Up above, Elias stepped into the ruined chamber and saw the fake campfire. He didn't disturb it, just moved past. That's when the first shot rang out. It came from the ridge, high angle, missed him by a hand's breadth. He dropped flat, rolled behind a beam, and fired once into the trees, heard the thunk of wood and nothing else. More shots followed, wild, hungry. The regulators weren't scouts, they were dogs with rifles. Elias didn't fire again. He moved low, fast, toward the deeper pit, toward her. Vera heard the shots, covered the boy with her own body. The echo shuddered the stones. Then boots scraped above. She rose, ready to strike, her eyes catching the faint glow of torchlight. But it wasn't a torch. It was Elia's drum, holding a flare he'd pulled from his saddlebag, lighting his own face. So she'd know. He said nothing. Just stepped forward, slow, rifle raised past her, sighting up the ledge. She stared at him. He looked like a man at war with something older than himself. The boy moaned behind her. Elias heard it, his jaw shifted. Then he nodded once. And Vera knew. She stepped aside. Elias took the edge of the pit like it was a church altar, crouched, and aimed into the dark. The regulators came down with knives first. No more shots. They thought the job was done. The first man to drop into the pit died before he could see who killed him. Elias drove the bayonet through his gut and used the body to brace against the others. Blood splashed the stone. It steamed. Vera grabbed her slag blade and struck low, cutting at tendons, ankles, knees. She didn't scream. Neither did they. It was not a battle. It was a slaughter. 3 men entered. None climbed out. When it was over, Elias collapsed onto the stones, breathing hard, left hand torn, right shoulder bleeding. Vera leaned against the far wall, face pale with exhaustion. The boy slept through it all, fever deeper now, skin waxen. I can't carry him any more, she said. Elias didn't answer. He just pulled the last man's coat from the corpse and threw it to her. Then he pulled a flask from inside his own coat and poured half its contents on his wounds, hissing once. You came back, she said, not like a question. Elias looked at her then, not with regret, not with guilt, but with a strange, ruined softness. No, he said, I never left. He stepped over the bodies, lifted the boy with both arms. The child stirred in his chest, murmured something. Eyes flicked open. You came back. Elia's voice cracked for the first time in 20 years. I did, he said, and carried him into the snow. The thaw came late that spring, slow and spiteful. Snow turned to crust, then slush, then bog, peeling back the rimlands like a gravebed. Beneath it, the old trails reappeared, grooved and half-washed, and the birds returned with their broken music. Elias walked now. The boy was too fragile to ride, and Vera limped with a wound she wouldn't show him. He made a crude sled from felled branches and canvas, lashed it with sinew from a regulator's pack. The horse had vanished during the fight. Left or eaten, he didn't ask. They moved by dusk and hid at dawn. Fires were small, buried. Talk was less than that. The boy slept most days, waking only to drink or ask where the birds had gone. Vera told him they were following them, staying just ahead. He believed her. It was easier than truth. Elias didn't know what they were heading toward. Not a town. No town would shelter her, or him, not after what they'd done. And the boy, he was worse off every day. The limp was permanent now. Elias could see it. Something wrong inside the hip. Maybe infection, maybe worse. One morning, the boy coughed blood into his blanket. Elias saw it when he changed the wrappings. He didn't speak of it. That night, Vera sat across from him, her back against a stone outcrop shaped like an open hand. He's dying, she said. Elias didn't deny it. He just stared at the fire. She picked up a stick, poked the coals. You ever think maybe I wasn't testifying for justice? Maybe I was just trying to live long enough to see something better? He said nothing. She kept going, voice flat. Your brother Ben, he was the first man who ever touched me without paying, but not in the way most would think kind. You understand? Elias nodded, slow. I knew what he was. But you still came, she said. Still rode to kill me. Elias looked at her now. There was no defense in his eyes, just weariness. I came to kill the past, he said. Didn't realize it had already turned to bone. She didn't answer. The fire cracked between them like a judge's gavel. The next day, the boy couldn't keep food down. They found a hunter's shack tucked into a grove of bent spruce trees. Elias kicked the door in, checked the corners, swept dust from the hearth. It wasn't shelter, not really, but it was a place to stop. Vera laid the boy on the cot and unwrapped his foot. The flesh was blue to the knee now, no more warmth in it. She covered it again. We need a doctor, Elias said. There isn't one. He stood over the boy a long time. The child had a fevered dream, lips moving without words. Elias heard his name once. That was enough to set something loose inside him. I'll find one, he said. Vera grabbed his coat. They'll hang you if they see you. I'm not going to town. Then where? He didn't answer, just took the sled harness, adjusted it to his back and left. No horse, just boots and snow and an old man's fury. He walked 3 days downhill into the old rail pass where fur trappers used to trade. Found a camp of Métis traders who still smoked beaver hides and chewed raw ginger root for sickness. One of them, a woman with a slit eye and 9 fingers, had once been a midwife. She didn't ask names, just packed her poultices and followed him back. The boy was barely breathing when they returned. The woman worked through the night, chanting low and feeding him broth through a carved horn spoon. She stitched the worst of the tissue, burned the rest with silver nitrate. The air smelled like coins and death. When dawn broke, she stood outside the shack with Elias. "You lose that leg, maybe he lives, maybe not." "What do you need?" Elias asked. "Nothing more you got," she said. He reached for coin anyway. She waved him off. "I owed a girl once, didn't help her. This pays it." She left without another word, into the woods like a ghost. Inside, the boy slept. Vera stood over him, blade in her hand. She wasn't crying, just watching the breath move shallow in his chest. "He still thinks you're someone else," she whispered. "I know. Thinks you're a father." Elias sat on the floor beside the cot. "Maybe I am." Vera looked at him for a long time, said nothing. The snow melted outside. Water ran in thin lines down the bark of trees. Birds returned. The boy lived. Not fully, not clean, but he lived. He'd never run again, never climb, but he breathed. And he smiled when he woke, slow and dazed, and said again, "You came back." This time, Elias didn't look away. And the mountains held their breath. They stayed through the thaw, the hunter's shack, once cold and hollow, filled with the smell of boiled roots, wet wool, wood smoke, and boy sweat. The child grew stronger in fits, breath steadier, skin less gray, but the leg turned stiff, immovable from hip to knee. Vera carved him a crutch from an old spruce branch. Elias sanded it smooth. Neither said aloud what it meant. The boy named the shack the fort, said it kept out the bad men, said the trees around it knew their names. Vera never corrected him. Elias didn't either. Let the child keep a myth if he wanted. Lord knew truth had only ever broken things. Vera watched Elias differently now, not soft, not warm, but with a kind of quiet understanding that came only after you'd watched someone kill to protect what they once rode out to destroy. She saw how he looked at the boy, like a man trying to remember how to love, like it hurt. One morning, Vera came in from gathering birch bark to find Elias gone. No note, no sign, the cot stripped, his boots missing. She stood there for a long while, didn't panic, didn't cry. Just waited. 3 days passed. Then on the 4th, Elias returned. With the horse. It was lean, scarred from brush, half wild, but it was theirs. He also brought something else, a parcel wrapped in oilcloth. Inside, 2 silver coins, a whetstone, a faded map, and a yellowed certificate. Land deed, 40 acres, basin floor, south of the ridge. Signed by a federal agent long dead. Stole it from a trader near Fort Raglan, Elias said, setting it on the table. He'd taken it off a dead man 10 years ago, figured he didn't need it anymore. Vera stared at the papers. "You planning to be something else now?" she asked. Elias didn't answer right away. He went to the boy, helped him stand. The child's arms shook against the crutch. He gritted his teeth, moved anyway. "I ain't gonna fall," he said. Elias crouched beside him, looked him square. "No," he said, "you're not." The snow gave way to green, not fast, not kindly, but enough. They left the shack with no ceremony, just packed what they had into a tanned hide bundle and walked the slope down. The horse carried the boy. Vera walked beside him, one hand always near the reins. Elias led the way. They reached the basin in 5 days. No one lived there now, not since the railroad veered west, but there was water, there were stones, and a collapsed cabin they could tear apart for wood. They built slow. First the frame, then the floor, then a roof that liked and then didn't. Vera planted roots, potato, wild onion, herbs she knew from the old country. The boy trapped rabbits, made stories out of bones. Elias fenced the eastern edge with old barbed wire strung between tree stumps. One morning the boy asked Elias, "Was I always yours?" Elias froze, his hands black with fence tar. He turned, met the child's eyes. "No," he said, "but I chose you." The boy thought about that, nodded. Good. That night Vera stood at the edge of the field, watching dusk come down in slow, blue bruises. Elias joined her. They didn't speak. She looked at him, eyes heavy. "Why didn't you do it?" she asked. "Why didn't you pull the trigger when you first saw me?" Elias watched the last of the sun vanish. "I saw myself," he said, "but smaller and scared, and I couldn't kill that." They stood a while longer, quiet as the dead. When they turned to go back inside, the wind shifted. It carried no sound of hoofbeats, no threat, just trees whispering to each other like old friends with long memories. Inside, the boy was asleep, beneath a blanket stitched with names. Vera picked up a kettle. Elias lit the fire. And somewhere high above, the mountains watched. Silent still, and satisfied that justice had been reshaped by something older than vengeance. Something that stayed. Something that came back.